Well, it's a pleasure to be here with my good friend, Dr. Tom Hackett. No doubt we're going to have a fun conversation. Tom, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm wondering what's in that question patch. I got a preview, but I didn't have time to review them. You'll get off the cuff responses.
Well, exactly what we need here, because we need the truth, my friend. So lay it out for us, and I'm looking forward to it. Just, we always have questions, and I know you have a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions, and so maybe today we can kind of hit upon a few things. There are going to be jobs that are created by AI. There are going to be jobs that are lost.
Yep.
And so can you, maybe as we start out, I'm kind of framing this up a little bit. We're going to talk about school, and I want to talk about the process that goes about adopting AI into the school classroom, because I think that's a big hurdle. And while we're all kind of watching the advertising, what is it actually going to look like in the school with the teacher and the students in the classroom?
Yeah. And
how is it going to help, or what is it going to do? As we know, it's going to change things. So that's kind of the overview of it, a little bit of what we've been chatting about. But just give me your thoughts and reaction to some of the stuff we were just mentioning.
Well, the first issue is that there's a myriad of definitions for AI, and none of them all that great, because it depends on the eye of the beholder, right? Like anything. And what is AI actually? And I ran across a definition the other day that I thought was pretty good, and it was that AI, like other great innovations that had to be implemented, an example being electricity, it's a generalized technology.
Right.
So that's a big difference from, here's a computer, and it does X. I mean, even though that's a very robust technology, AI is more of a generalized set of possibilities and capabilities that they can bring a lot of benefit and potential, and they can also possibly create a lot of disruption. So I think if you're looking at any industry, the first thing to do is define at least what aspect of AI are we interested in.
Right.
And then how can it be utilized in a way that makes us better? Not how can it substitute. In other words, I'm going to substitute AI for whatever's last generation's technology.
Right.
And that is our tendency. We tend to get caught in a rut, and a vision rut, where we don't really use the technology to take us to the next level. I'll give you two examples in education where I think that has happened.
All right, go ahead.
One is with all the capacity of the internet. I don't think with the advent of the internet, I was there when it happened in education, and we certainly didn't think through what are all the possibilities, how can this make us better in terms of the bottom line, student performance.
It's almost like it just arrives faster than you were prepared to deal with it in some ways. I heard people actually say that at some point.
Well, it does, and then there's the two reactions. There's the early adopters who hype it to a point to where it'll do everything but send us to Mars, right? Or maybe send us to Mars. And then there's going to be a school of thought, a significant school of thought that says, hey, this is going to be one more thing to distract us from our mission, and I just don't really have time to think it through right now, but down the road.
Right. Oh, man, I think you just opened up something there, because I think I get the feeling, this is the feeling, we're not no facts at this point, but intuition says that, that's exactly how people react.
Yeah. That was the internet was certainly an example during my time in public education.
Sure.
About the time I moved into post-secondary education as a professor, that was the time when the smartphone was really blowing up. Mm-hmm. And because I was at Columbus State when I finally got a smartphone, because my colleagues were texting me, and I couldn't text back. That's why I got it, not because I cared anything about access to the internet. But
that particular scenario is going to play out about 1 million times coming up for a lot of people. I'm thinking.
Yeah. I guess what happened with smartphones was the same thing. There was the initial resistance. Well, we don't want them in the classroom because they're going to distract from the mission, where I'm the teacher and you're the student, and we have this set of things that we're going to be tested on in March, right?
Right.
And what made me sort of an adopter of the smartphone for a lot of things. I wasn't using one at all. I had a flip phone, and the younger guys had the smartphones. But I was teaching a class, and I noticed that some of my students had their phones out. And I didn't make an issue out of it because I didn't want to. We just kept on with what we were doing, and it happened to be I was lecturing from a PowerPoint of all things. But
we were definitely going to go back to the old lecture and the PowerPoint at some point soon. Here.
Of course.
Go ahead, though. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
So my graduate assistant was in the class, and we were having a conversation the next day, and I said, well, I felt kind of bad, like the class was sort of boring, and she said, you don't know what they're doing with their smartphones. And I said, no. And she said, they were discussing what you were talking about. In other words, they were having an internal classroom discussion that I wasn't even aware of.
And they're not checking their email at that point. They're actually on task. Come on.
According to my graduate assistant. So I thought that's when I started thinking, technologies really do have vast possibilities. Because what if you start a class, say, use your smartphones in class? I mean, if they're checking and shopping, so what?
Yeah.
Because that's how we use them. We talk, we interact, we shop, we do it all as part of a piece, and that was the aspect of it I needed to embrace because I didn't get it until I started using it.
Right. Well, there's always that sort of first reaction, and I can see teachers saying, wait a minute, put your cell phones in the box so you get them after class. And I think a lot of people, school systems entirely adopted that idea. And now that's an initial reaction, but I don't see that reaction with AI just yet. Not people saying, I'm turning on, and I will not let AI in here. Now, there may be some, and then I just don't see that as much because I think for two reasons. One, people don't know enough about it yet, and that's what we're trying to do is talk about it so we can share some of this. And they don't know what to do with it once they identify.
That's the key issue, but therein lies the opportunity.
Right.
Here's the opportunity to get some things right. And so in my little section that I was working on yesterday for our project,
all right,
I was looking at this specific thing we're talking about. It's sort of a little synergy thing happening here, but the idea being
I'll take it.
that if school systems could start saying, well, this is coming, what are its capabilities, at least as we understand them now, and are there some, the first question is, are there some that can increase our productivity in the way that the private sector is increasing productivity?
Yes, absolutely.
And for the education field, it should be, in my view, this is a Thomism, and a lot of people have other views of what it should be.
Well, let them view it.
But ultimately, if my student cannot take what I have helped them to learn and go out and earn a living with it, then in some ways, or at least applied in some way that improves things, then I feel like maybe we haven't done what we need to do. So the bottom line, ultimately, to simplify it, is student learning. So can we ramp up student learning? How much?
Right.
But that's the first question we need to ask, rather than to say, hey, everybody's using AI, we better do it too, and never define what we're using it for or why we're using it. And I think that therein lies, it's like anything else. You have the height of achievement, and then you also have the depths of the depths too,
Well,
where you
that-
don't apply it correctly. Yeah.
Well, that variability is an issue. Now, all learners are not the same.
That's
All
right.
Individuals are not the same. I mean, we could go on and on, but the idea that some may be prepared, depending on their socioeconomic level and system, that they've been exposed to things. They've had worked in their with their family at the home before school, and they figured these things out, and they bring that information into school. And there are going to be other kids and children there sitting there that never has been exposed or just a little bit exposed. But I keep coming back to what you just said. It doesn't sound like we're prepared. We haven't done the preparation. Now, most things, if you're taking on a journey or you're going somewhere, you're going to do something, you kind of figure out what you need, what the tools are, what's our purpose, what are our goals, when we're going to time schedule, all of those things. And it's not there yet for us. And so the technology arrives before we're ready to use it. And I have a number of friends, including my good friend Jeff, that says, and he admits he's a Luddite in these kind of things, and he basically says, well, it's getting here well before we're prepared to do anything with it.
Well, he's right, but there again, I keep going back to the idea of opportunity. So we know this now. Now, what opportunity is presented that we can start defining and discussing what the possibilities can be for every field. In the private sector, they have no trouble saying, okay, I've got a division that's an R&D division, and we want a concept and a proof of concept, and we're going to test it out and see if it makes money. So
Right.
if education, the field of education, would develop those kinds of sort of think tanks that think through these new things.
Right,
And by
right.
the way, it's not just about the utilization of the AI, but there's a second issue, and this is something maybe we can discuss later, revolving around how do we teach or work with students so they can negotiate or work in the new AI environment that's going to be out there, even though we can't really predict wholly how it's going to be there. So there are two issues for education that it's critical now, in my view, that education leaders and really everybody sit down and start looking at how do you work in those two areas. First, what should students learn about AI? Second, how can we use AI to increase productivity in terms of student learning?
Right.
So, because here's what's going to happen if we don't, because it's happened so many times before. There's going to be political leaders who decide this is a great thing, and they're going to budget money, and school districts are not going to be able to refuse the money, but the money's going to be tied to use AI for X,
Right.
without ever asking whether X is really important to what we're trying to do.
Again, the cart before the horse and
Yeah.
not being prepared. And so it sounds like we, just based on what you were talking about, is that all boats have to rise. I mean, we've all got to get prepared. We've all got to learn this. The kids in school, the parents, the teacher, the administrators, even the government, politicians, and so forth. We got a learning curve ahead of us, and nobody asks for this too much. I think we got. And let me see if I can expand on that a little bit. It seems like the corporations, the people who are behind the AI, want to build these big systems that drain all the energy. I heard about Wyoming the other day that one of those data centers is going to use more than the residents in the entire state you have been using. So it's doubling energy consumption and things like that. So I guess the issue of whether we're prepared or not, and whether or not this is just, on the other side of things, this is just a tool. This is just a technology, and we're going to have a tool in the toolbox. I've heard people say that. I may have even said it, and just did. That the process more about it. Now, go back to what I was saying. The corporations have a profit goal. Their goal
right.
is to create for their constituents and profit and so forth and those kind of things. That's different from school. School has a more nebulous sort of goal that we want to train and teach people. Wow, all of a sudden you're all over the place, so you got to narrow that down a little bit. So I think the corporations have at least that advantage, that they know exactly what they're going to do. We're going to make money, and we got to do everything around that to do that. In this teaching of these in AI, I mean, what is the ultimate goal? To become a better AI worker, if you will, or is it going to be something different than what the corporations have sort of focused on?
Well, first, you're absolutely right. There's a profit incentive, and even more to the point, there's a productivity incentive to where stockholders who own companies demand that leadership of those companies continue to improve the bottom line.
Right.
So if you don't improve the bottom line, you don't keep your job.
Almost at all costs sometimes, it seems. Yeah.
But the truth of the matter about education, and I was sensitive to this as a public educator, but the truth of the matter truly is that the bottom line for education also equates directly to dollars. Here's how it equates to it.
Okay. Go.
Because by every measure right now, and it's been and going back years and years and years, maybe to the 70s, the U.S. student, their ability in the areas we say we're measuring. Now, whether we should measure them, I don't know if that's true, but everybody else does. We measure them on these accountability measures. If it's an international measure, U.S. students perform in most areas woefully less than the European schools and schools overseas.
Yes, that's true.
And
Sad.
this keep and whether there's a lot of reasons for that, there's a lot of complexity to that, but the truth of the matter is that's what's happening right now. So U.S. student performance equates to U.S. productivity. And right now, corporations are saying, we can't hire the people to do the highly technical jobs we have and that are going to become more technical under AI.
That's where the job market's going, so yeah.
So we have to hire foreign workers for those kinds of jobs. And the jobs that at one time were the line job where you put a nut on the wheel of a car and that's what you did and you earn union scale, that's done by a robot. So that job is now, how do you supervise the AI, program it, do different things to increase U.S. productivity. And if we can't find a way to increase student performance in schools and also the way that they interact with these new technologies, then, my thought is we are leaving dollars on the table. Will the U.S. economy suffer? How much? I have no idea. But what I'm saying is if we can get it right, the U.S. economy it's still the top economy in the world.
Yeah, sure.
But it will by far outpace every other economy if we can get this right. And we have the tools to do it, but it needs to be thought through. And I'm not sure that everyone sees that possibility. We're a lot like the U.S. military, where we're always looking at the last war we fought.
Right.
We're still looking at how to fight. In warfare, we're learning how to fight insurgencies, but we don't know that the next warfare is going to look like what we saw in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Right.
So I think U.S. education is in that same boat. Now, for a corporation whose next quarter profitability had better be better than last quarter's profitability, or the CEO loses his job, they don't have a problem with R&D.
Right.
So
yeah,
that's a long answer.
No, I like it. I don't. It almost pretends the notion that we're not training students in what the industry and those corporations really need. So, I mean, I don't know if we need. I'm pretty sure we don't need to follow that to its logical conclusion, and every student learns how to work at the corporation. That doesn't sounds a little bit Orwellian there, but the idea that we're not even close to that at this point. I mean,
you're right.
That what the students that are being turned out, the graduates that are coming out, really have to learn things on the side And that's a kind of interesting problem, it seems like, that you're not getting, if you're looking at it from the student's point of view, you're not getting those skills that the employer wants to hire me for. I have to do that on my own, maybe, or figure that out. And because the school's not they're sort of teaching the content that they think you need. And I agree, there's some basics that you have to have: the writing, the reading, the math. I mean, you've got to have those kind of things. But at the same time, we're behind other nations in that.
Well,
And there's this expectation now we're going to serve up for these AI corporations and change schools in order to meet that demand.
Well, that's generally an issue for education, but it's not an issue for every aspect of education. I'll tell you what I mean, and you can weigh in on this because you certainly have
Got an opinion.
You're sort of out at the head of the curve on this, but typically, and I'm going to talk about higher ed, which I left in 2018. So it wasn't. It is a long time ago, but not that long ago.
No.
We were still looking at the issue of certainly the core and even the fields, the generalized fields of instruction that should aim at preparing students to go out and be good workers, good employees, that kind of thing.
Right.
We tend to exist in a curricular isolation chamber.
Okay.
Where we're self-referential, here's the curriculum, and then we get a bunch of professors together and we tweak the curriculum, but it really looks a lot like the last curriculum we have, and we don't ever see a lot of change, or at least not during my career in any of these places.
Right.
Except in the field of mental health and counseling, because those teaching programs are also tied and joined at the hip with the actual practitioners. So in other words, if it doesn't work at the Pastoral Institute or at the hospital where these therapists are going to go to work, you guys didn't teach it.
Right.
You know, it wasn't pie in the sky. Yeah, you taught theory, but the theory was to give a knowledge base so you could go in and be a practitioner. I heard that said over and over again in your program, practitioner-based.
Yeah, and also a big portion of what we did was send people out on practicum and internships and real-world applications and supervise them and oversee their work so they develop those skills. Hey, that I haven't thought about this until you just mentioned, but that's pretty good. That's a decent model for getting what the people who hire and the people who teach and kind of connecting with each other, because it turns out what both want.
Now, contrast that with the field of education where we take them through a core, so that's 3 years of core. Then the education courses, we go through that. And then we have a semester where you go out and you hang out and try to do a little teaching, and you're, at least in my case, abysmal at it. And then I
doubt that.
No,
we won't let that go.
No,
that's not
don't
true.
doubt it.
I've been in your classes. I know that's a different thing.
Yeah,
but all right, that humility is valuable.
Initially,
but let me just say that no.
Anyway,
go ahead.
1 quarter of student teaching is what we called it then. Did little to prepare me for the reality of walking in February and taking over an English class at Central High School. I mean, and I was so, and it's not. I'm not slamming on my preparation. I think given how schools of education were organized during that time, but now that was 40 years ago, 40, 50 years ago. Now, shouldn't we be? If you think about how is work conducted in a hospital and how was it conducted 50 years ago? The hospital of today is unrecognizable.
Absolutely.
Except it's a building. But even in when I go into an ER, say, and watch the teams work, it's light years from when I worked at the medical center when I was in college. So, but you don't see that kind of change in education, I don't think. At least this is, again, my point of view, but I'm saying suddenly we've got a galvanizing, critical radical change to how everything's going to be done, now's the time, right?
I would think that now's the time, but I just don't know. We just seem to be unprepared and trip our way into the future a lot of ways, and that is a criticism for all of us. But you're right. Now is the time, and well, are you? Well, tell me a little bit about, and a couple of things that I'll come to this question, but before that, I was thinking that when online education got its big start there, and we were trying to put courses online, and of course then COVID after that, but before that, and introducing the online teaching idea, but also degrees, and we were trying to do some things to get more students into programs. We were reducing a 2-year degree program to a 1-year degree program, and we lost. What do you put in? What do you take out? What the student is left with? Those kind of things. I always thought that was a little bit crazy in a way, that we were trying to fit things into a way, and we were chopping off maybe important things that the students should be exposed to in order to get the degree faster and get more people out. So do you think that with this change, and we're going to talk about a difference in the content and process issue, and I want to talk about a little bit of the skills that are being touted as what students need in the future for AI. We'll come back. So that this notion that we're not prepared goes a long way. And should we then start looking at maybe a collaboration and a connection between, in each discipline, because you use the example of counseling, that we're working directly with sites that the people will hire our graduates, and so that's kind of promising from the graduate point of view, to look and say, hey, this place over here will hire me because I worked there as an intern. Should we do that with other disciplines? I don't know how that would work exactly, if there's any hands-on. Certainly in the sciences and other places there's ways to do that, and biology and other kind of things, but not all disciplines may have that straightforward path to what happens in the classroom is going to result in that student getting a job in that particular discipline.
My answer is yes.
Okay,
but
too easy of a question.
It's a complex question. That what we have done, and I'll talk about higher ed for a minute, but it's true across the board. Is periodically we do a strategic plan, and we invite all stakeholders. That was the term we used in leadership, to go and write on white paper on the wall, and then we coalesce that, and we develop a plan, and we talk about the plan. And then we have some advisory committees, but then everybody gets busy, and we go back to our silos. See, I think to your point about online learning, that was something that suddenly exploded for us. We weren't prepared for it, and then there were institutions that were saying, yes, get your degree in 3 years, and it's cheaper, and suddenly it was a competitive market where we had to come up with our own our own product, whether it made sense or not. But here's what could have been done that ultimately would have had a huge payoff. To your point about shifting a degree to 2 years, there's the assumption, okay, we're taking all this critical stuff and we're just banging it together and we're not doing a good job of teaching it. Or, here's the opportunity. Can we go back and look at, heresy of heresies? What in the core do we actually have to teach? Does a therapist need to know college algebra? I don't know, maybe. But I'm saying we never have those discussions. The core, periodically we would have an advisory group that goes back, but it's tied to who is employed at all the institutions in the state. So ultimately what you come up with is a core that, to paraphrase the Who, here's the same core, what happened to the old core? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, no, I got it.
Here's the new boss, same as the old boss.
Yes, sir.
And so every time I looked at a new core, and it's not just higher ed, when you go back and have these discussions that get so political, well, what do you give up in public education? Well,
Right.
you can't teach everything from toothbrushing to critical thinking skills to every, the latest thing the legislature wants you to incorporate.
Right.
And also teach everybody through advanced algebra and trig. It's just too
There's just
much.
time.
It's not
You can't do
productive. And by the way, you do that, but you never ask, hey, what are the industries in Georgia, and
Oh.
what do people need for those industries? Anyway, that's
Exactly.
a
No, but
separate question.
Yeah, no, I like what you're saying about that, and I'm thinking too that you've made some innovation and worked with people in your administrative roles to try to bring the community and connect the university to the corporate world out there, and this is going to be a mandate. It seems like now, because where are the students going to work? They talked about, and I'll give you a statistic if you don't mind, but this one says in the next 5 years alone, they expected that 85 million jobs will be displaced,
Yep.
and approximately 90 million jobs will be created.
Yep.
Now, okay, I think we got 5% there, a little bit, or 5 more points on the creation side, but this doesn't. I mean, practically, what that means is you lose your job, and now you got to go for retraining for the new job, and you better know what the new job wants, because you can get the training that doesn't fit, and you're still unemployed. That's just that thought of being displaced, and I know we're writing about that a little bit, but that doesn't sound like a thing that people want to go through.
Well, there's a flood a coming. Well, I'll just worry about that when it gets here.
Oh,
See, to me,
that.
that's not very productive thinking.
Got it.
Even if that projected statistic, is wildly wrong,
And it could be.
but it's still a telling thing, because every new innovation has had this outcome. And the thing is, there's an opportunity with those 95 million jobs, or whatever it turns out to actually be.
Right.
There's an opportunity there if we can think it through and think, first, how can we get a seat at the table and have an understanding of where private industry, the public sector in terms of government and military and medicine and all the other players in this, if we can get a seat at the table and then actually go back and talk about, this is what is being projected, how can we get in on at the head of this curve, not follow behind trying to tack AI technology along with film strip project. Oh, we don't use those. Overhead project. No, we don't use those. Laser disc. You see what I'm saying? I'm being silly about the thing, but I write in I haven't sent this to you yet, but one of the things I wrote about was an experience where I went up to a Georgia school and I sat in the media center, and there was the museum of everything in the public schools since the 50s. Film strip projectors, overhead projectors, laser discs, cassette. They still had them, and they were still all tagged with their government fund tags, and they were probably tied to some agenda. But typically, we tacked that technology on, then it died, and we went for the next shiny new thing, but we were tacking that on too. Here's an opportunity not to tack, but to participate, influence. I keep going back to that same concept, but it's about planning, really.
Yeah, I am so with you on that. But then again, I've been a therapist for a long time, it seems to me, and seems like a long time as I get older. But as I reflect back, I'm not sure the human being in the situation right now across the globe. Let's look at it in a general population kind of sense. Yeah, you got the early adapters, and you got those people who can kind of move and change on a dime. But you got a large population that seems to be, I don't know what a better word would be, but anyway, stuck in a rut. They're happy, they're complacent with this. They're not really looking to change anything. Matter of fact, we're trying very hard to keep it the same. We don't want to have this disruption come into our lives. And I think there's a giant group of that. I don't know what the proportion would be, but they may not want to play in this particular arena. And so it's going to be up to people who are at least innovative to a certain extent, but also motivated to do to take this mantle up and start working with it. Join in the learning process of getting to another level of understanding with AI. So I guess I'm throwing out a little bit of doubt that the human species, our group right here, are we ready for this type of change? We've been slow for everything else, and we tripped on our own 2 feet trying to go forward.
Well,
sorry, I don't want to be
well. There
bummer on
is Darwinian selection. So those who can will thrive, and those who can't will not thrive.
Okay.
And so, hence the predictions of winners and losers. And right now, it's very unpredictable who that might be, because there's so much going on and there's so much noise out there.
I don't have an answer to that question. It's a concern of mine, obviously.
Yeah,
Just
it
put
should
it
be.
out there.
It should be.
But if public schools, if they were still going to be required in our short term and future,
Yeah.
and let's then take a look at the almost impossible thing to change the core,
Yeah.
or at least look at things and give an opportunity for those young students coming up to have a progressive and innovative some choices for themselves to be able to do that. But we've got to teach it. There's something. I guess it's coming back to something that some of us can see something and go and move toward it, and others see then no, I'm not even going to entertain the thought about it. So, but if you're so it's exposure to certainly as well as motivation, but the exposure to it should be almost primary in the rebuilding of whatever. And I don't know how to even talk about the core. You know much more about that than I do in that. But simply, from the general point of view, it's reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Yeah, and two, typically we've had a essentially say a 4-year institution has 2 years of required. It doesn't matter your course of study.
Right, yeah,
not
not your specialty. Yeah.
Interestingly, some of the privates don't have that. Some of the private universities don't have that.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, and they don't have accreditation standards. And no one goes to those private institutions and say, you guys are terrible, because they have billions of dollars of endowments and huge names because they've been around forever. But I think too,
and they're connected, I would guess, to the institutions that hire the graduates who we talked
yeah,
about before.
yeah, I'm sure every institution has its own institutional sacred rituals that you have to go through. And again, when I was writing about this, I talked about some of these practices in education, but it's true in every institution, but in education as being almost quasi-religious. In other words, it's ritual, it's a rite of passage. Every student has to do that. Why should you be different? Well, you have it until you don't have it, but also there are other pathways. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
When I came into Columbus College at that time, I had extra Carnegie credits is what it amounted to, because of the different schools I'd gone to traveling around the United States. And so my father suggested, he said, there is a test called a college placement test, a CLEP test, and you can take it, and if you ace out these areas, then you don't have to take these core courses. Well, I didn't have to take a lot of the core courses. My problem was I was so immature that it didn't matter, and I dropped out of college to be a hippie. But after I got over my hippie days, I was able to.
That's another podcast altogether. We'll come back to that. Appreciate you sharing, though.
But my point is, if I could then go into the English department without taking virtually any of the core courses and come out and graduate and be fairly successful as an English teacher, then did I need it? And why me? I'm not I'm not any rocket scientist. I'm not going to NASA like Sean Cruz, and I'm not going to do anything like that.
None of us like so.
So I guess my my point is there are opportunities for defining what we want, but it will require pain and retooling. And maybe some of these decisions are political, but nevertheless, if the guys who had to fight saber-toothed tigers made decisions based on politics, and some of them probably did, but my guess is those who did are no longer with us, and the human beings that survived were the ones that made the right decisions and were able to fight the saber-toothed tigers, right?
Hey, I mean, that's a long way to go to get to the AI industry and how it is affecting us now. But I see your meaning, and I understand that. If there's a retooling, nobody wants to retool. First of all,
right.
I don't want to do anything different than I did yesterday, kind of thing. And then there's a resistance that we all have to deal with in some ways, and eventually acceptance of what we need to take a look at. That retooling is going to be incredibly difficult because of all the things you just mentioned, from the political side of it to the individual to the group and so forth. But we need to do it, because I don't think our graduates right now are ready for any of this in just a basic 4-year degree. Now,
and they're telling us that. They're telling us we're not prepared for the workforce, and we're not getting jobs, and the economic environment is tremendously difficult, except for those who are winners. They're saying, I'm making plenty of money and everything's good. So it's about ultimately it's about making the right decisions. Now, how can we create an environment where that happens? Now, a part of the issue too, and I remember having this discussion with academics I respect, and where they would say, well, university life is about a lot more than that.
Yeah.
Course of study is really about developing as a human being and that kind of thing. I agree with that, all that way of thinking to a point.
Right.
But when my son graduated from Columbus State, then he went to other schools to develop the skills to do what he does for a living. So in other words, the skills he had didn't apply to the workforce he was entering. And he had to find a job where he could go to school and quickly get ready, because guess what? We're going to be parents, and we got to feed the kids, right?
Right.
So as an educator, I always feel an obligation to feed the kids first. And to educate, and that goes with Maslow. Let's take care of those basic needs first, and then self-actualize and educate the inner human being.
And I do think that is sort of the idea of the core curriculum, that everybody needs this. We all have to have numbers and math, all those good things, but reading is important, writing, that kind of thing. So the transition may be difficult for the systems involved. I'm talking school systems, local government, state government, and Fed. I guess Fed's been dissolved at this point. We'll see what happens with all that. But so I don't know what a timeline looks like for that. But if AI is on this super fast track and education is still horse and buggy era, we're going to be in kind of big trouble, because it falls back to we can't provide the students out of our country to find the jobs and work in the places they need to work to improve the economy and themselves and others and so forth. That's a big challenge, I think, ahead.
I was struck by what you said about how change is hard for people and that human beings have difficulty with change, and that is true.
Yeah, you said that much better than I did.
I thought you were right on. You were right on the target with that. The thing I've noticed about human beings, though, give a human being a good catastrophe, and most people seem to rise to the occasion and have no trouble with resilience, creativity, and retooling if that's necessary.
Right.
So my question is, Do we have to wait for an AI catastrophe? Do we have to wait for a Sputnik before we decide to go to the moon again?
It's kind of buried in my thoughts about this,
Yeah,
too.
so-
That we get that. I don't know how that's going to turn out, but when you just mentioned some of the skills, and I was also reading this, and I'll try to throw this out real quick. And I don't know if anybody likes watching somebody read, but so what are the essential skills of the future for these AI students? And it says something about this. I'll give you a quick list. Analytical thinking and innovation. In other words, you have to be a creator with innovation. Active listening. Oh boy, we teach that enough in our counseling programs. Effective learning strategies, technology literacy. So you really need to know the terms and how to speak the language. Creativity, which you've mentioned. Originality, coming up with something new, taking two old things, coming up with something new in that. And the initiative. So these have rarely been emphasized in the school system. This author makes that, and I'm almost agreeing with him at that point, that school systems have not taught that. And they're rarely, well, they may have taught it, but it's not emphasized too much and too far and like a course in some particular subject matter. But they're usually, and you said this earlier, those kind of skills and adaptability are used in the workplace or other places than the school setting. And that seems to be an issue. I think it's going to be a problem if I don't know how to teach creativity and initiative and drive and all that, but I know what motivates people. So maybe we can figure out a reward system of some sort, a reinforcement system that helps the student push toward learning and being more initiating of things and creativity and that innovation kind of thing as a result of a setting that we create in the schools to be able to help that student get to that skills. Because this author is basically saying this is what they need, and we're not giving it to them.
Except you do know how to teach it because I've watched you do it. So,
there we go.
There was this room at Columbus State where you went and you sat in what amounted to a very tiny room over a two-way mirror.
Right.
And one of the Baltimore Gillum students was, and incidentally, Baltimore and Gillum were in that room looking through the two-way mirror along with the rest of the class. And one of the students had to go into that cauldron and actually provide real marriage therapy to a real couple who was really looking at becoming divorced. I remember this so clearly.
That is crazy.
Do you remember?
I'm not sure I do.
Do you remember those kinds of episodes?
I know those kinds of episodes very well.
So then, when the therapy session is over, and it was lengthy, and the student had no one in there with him. It was a him. The wife and the husband. The husband was, well, I better not say too much about it. I'm sure it was confidential. But anyway, they were real people.
Right.
With real issues.
Oh, yeah.
They left. They seemed like they enjoyed clearing the air on some issues. They needed to, believe me. They left. And then that poor counseling student walked back into the back room, and it was Shark Attack.
What was the gladiator in the Coliseum?
Except it sounded very counselor-like. Not why did you do this, but so tell us, what was your thought process when you said this in response to that? And that session was another hour and a half. Now, to me,
I guess you do kind of teach some of that, yeah, I do.
Well, to me, it was all about his autonomy, his creativity, his problem solving, his dealing with the stress, and it's double stress because it's not just the couple, but it's everybody watching.
And that's plenty, by the way, from the couple, but the
right.
auditorium watching you.
But see, to me, as I observed some of those things, being sort of your buddy, and you invited me to do some of that stuff, I started implementing some of that into my leadership courses.
Oh, that is so cool.
I felt like these guys needed to go in and actually experience the kinds of things leadership, not read the theory. I mean, reading the theory is great, but
Application, I guess, is the key
So,
factor in there.
So that I won't tell the old story about how I brought in Channel 9 for real and had them interview students in the middle of class. But suffice to say, the students looked like deer in the headlights. But I stole the idea from the counseling program. I think.
And we got it from some others. So there you go.
But the point is,
particular reference, but yes.
If we're focused on you have to spit out certain things from the core, and that's all we ever do, or certain things I'm teaching Ed Leadership 211, and you have to be able to give me an essay test at the end of the semester, I don't really prepare you to be a superintendent with a board.
Yes.
It just does not.
Yes, and I think that brings me to this idea of what does it look like. And
yeah.
I sent you a text notice, and this was just me brainstorming a little bit. But the idea that mentoring is something that people are talking about as a way to change the classroom. In other words, we're going to pay more individual attention to the student. We're going to mentor. We're going to do activities in the classroom that support this notion, and so forth. But I don't see how that's transitioned from the lecture and then giving you a test on it, as you described, moving toward this group exercise, analytical kind of thing with mentoring. You've got the mentor there with you and guiding you through this, and this whole situation of guiding people to the learning process. First of all, I don't think people are trained in doing those kind of things. Secondly, I don't know how you pull that off, because you've got to change what you do in the classroom. Otherwise, everybody's sitting in seats staring at the front of the classroom, and we know that tradition. We know how that works, and that's the expectation. And all of a sudden, not only AI saying, hey, you're not going to get a job, you're probably going to lose the one you've got, you're going to have to retool, relearn everything, and all of a sudden you've got not just the content, but you got to learn how to process and work in a process, as counselors talk about it, the ability to react to others, to help others, to find a way, dealing with the resistance, dealing with all of those things. It's like not only do you have to become an AI expert, but you have to become a professional counselor before you graduate as well to work in these industries. So I'm wondering a little bit about this, and some may be just automated tasks, and you get the job and you're the guy controlling the robot that makes the widget or something to that effect, and it's fairly linear. But the implication here is that things are going to be much more interactive, and the expectations are going to change, and how people relate to each other is going to change. And because you are doing something now that they expect you to be innovative and creative and come up with something new. Join my company, but when you become the employee, we expect you now to come up with something that's going to make us money and going to help this company. And so you got to prepare the person for that expectation. Wow, it sounds like a lot. It seems like a lot.
Well, a junior advocate with a law firm is going to need to be able to tell partners to keep the job.
Oh, yeah.
I'm predicting, I don't know this, but I'm saying
that's all right. That's where we're at.
Is going to need to tell partners how she is going to use AI to increase billable hours by 10%, 20%. Otherwise, she won't be there. The kid from another school will be there who can do that.
Right, and win that big case, that they're expecting, and make the company look good in the press and those kind of things. So there's going to be some real expectations for folks. Maybe we need to figure out an AI internship. I'm not sure what that might look like. Interesting idea. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today, sir. You've got a lot of thought about this AI thing. Plus, you're bringing all of the stuff from your school experience and administrative experience and principal and superintendent and all of that. And so you've got a good view on what this education system is now. If I could ask you the hard question as we end today, but all right, you're in charge. I just I became president, and now appointed you to run education in America, and particularly on this school system that we have throughout America in our colleges and universities. And you have the expectation that AI is going to make this tremendous change. Its impact is going to be huge. I put you in charge of it. Where do you begin? What might you do? And I know that's an unfair question, but give it a shot.
To me, that's not a difficult question.
What?
It's really not, and the reason because it's something that's should, to me, really intuitive, and that is, shouldn't education leaders, and I'm not talking about just the senior leaders, we always do that, and they go out for a great breakfast with community leaders and talk a lot, and then it never translates, but shouldn't the leaders on down to the principal, assistant principal, and senior teacher level be interacting with the people actually using AI?
Wow.
And then come back and say, what did we see? That's where you said, well, how would I start? I think
that's where you start. You would put people in those situations. In other words, you go find out what this is and define it and get your reaction to it, and then come back and analyze and synthesize.
And the senior leader has the obligation, because there's going to be, well, I saw this, but it doesn't really. The senior leader has the obligation to go back to the other leadership and say, nevertheless, if you're going to be in your role next year, you're going to have a game plan.
There you go.
And to me, that's what industry is great at doing, asking questions. What do our purchasers, our consumers want? Mm-hmm. And, well, we've always been an ice cream company. Well, they don't want ice cream. They all want diet ice cream. So how are we going to, well, our plants won't, well, figure it out, because next year, if you don't have a diet ice cream plant, you're gone. And that's what industry does.
Yes.
But we have, again, there's a lot of reasons for it, but but my father would have said that institutions of learning go back to the Middle Ages, and they were run by churches usually, and they're tremendously guided by ritual. My father would have said that.
Right, ritual.
Yeah. And so we've got to
it's hard to change those rituals, I guess. And if you mentioned Middle Ages, I just went back and did a whole thing in my head about that in terms of learning. But I don't, the other thing that popped in my head just quickly was that the other corporations and other entities have leadership, a leader. Sometimes you point to one person, sometimes it's a group or a small group. The boardroom, that kind of thing. School system, the education system in America. Who's our person?
Well,
I don't think we have one.
Typically school boards, but the accountability to moms and dads, to the line where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
That mom and dad that bring their child to you for education,
right,
or the parent that writes the check for the tuition. Well, I don't know if they write checks anymore, but let's say they do.
Got it.
We don't listen to them. And what I always tell my children when they ask me, "Hey, Pop, what do I do about the school?" I always tell them the same thing. You're the parent. You're the expert on that child.
There you go.
Go in and ask the right questions and ask for the right things to be done for that child in a respectful way that builds collaboration, but don't avoid doing it. And if you do, then the schools really aren't accountable. Folks always do better. Boy, I'm saying so many things that are heretical, but folks do better when they're watched.
That's very true.
I play better when I'm watched.
Well, all right. That is really interesting. I want to follow up on that sometime, but not now.
Not now.
What I want to do is just thank you for spending time with me and talking about this. And I realized that the parents may need to realize they have more power in this
They do.
situation.
Yeah.
And listen, we need to write about that a little bit more because I'm curious about it. You have firsthand information when your daughter-in-law or somebody says, "Hey, what are we doing in this school?" And you can kind of help and focus and redirect them in some way and give them some support. So I think we need to spend some time on that. What does a parent have in their arsenal to deal with AI? And what if they don't like some of the things that happen with their AI in the school with their child? So, what, probably, and I think I've said this a couple of times in different ways, but just like the state, several states, Illinois, I think is one that came up with the legal policy for that AI in mental health needs to be supervised by an actual human being, by a counselor, so that it's not just going to an AI therapist. You're going to a therapist who will help use AI and help you with it. So I like those kind of things. It almost sounds like we need that in education too. We need those group of people, maybe politicians, as you mentioned, all those different constituencies coming together. And let's talk about, and mostly parents, I would say large representation for parents, having children in school, to then develop more than one thing. Help them develop the curriculum, if you will, to a certain extent they can, but also the policies and procedures and what happens in the process, and how can you change things that are on the wrong track, and take a look at being an advisory group to this. Almost every school needs an advisor, and it's probably true that they have that in lots of cases, or in other ways they do that with the school board meetings and so forth. But it just seems like we need to kind of team together a little bit more throughout this, and just to go back to some things, we said that corporations and the people who are hiring the graduates need to be connected to the school,
Absolutely.
and the school needs to be connected back. So I appreciate you being here today, my friend. We're going to do more of this. We're going to continue to talk about this. I hope you'll join us. Mike Baltimore, Dr. Tom Hackett.
So long.
Talk to you next time.